The moment I realized the thread had to be explained came during ordinary conversations. Someone would sit across from me describing confusion that sounded painfully familiar. They spoke about the mind generating meaning faster than they could test it against actual reality. They spoke about symbols appearing everywhere, about feeling as if life had suddenly become a coded message that they were supposed to decipher. Listening to them felt like hearing echoes of corridors I had already walked through. That was when the responsibility of translation became unavoidable, a way of orientation. In Buddhist tradition, there is an image of the Bodhisattva, the one who could step fully away from suffering, but instead remains near the world to help others. The Bodhisattva does not claim any superiority. The commitment is compassion, rooted in actual real-world experience. Someone who knows the terrain and stays close enough to guide others through it. That myth describes something psychological rather than mystical. When a person has moved through the labyrinth, they recognize its patterns quickly in others. They hear the tone in someone's voice when sleep has begun collapsing. They recognize the moment meaning starts expanding faster then the nervous system can integrate it. Compassion in this context is practical. It means reminding people about thread. Sleep stabilizes perception. The body anchors the mind. Routine prevents imagination from drifting too far into abstraction. Community keeps interpretation accountable. These principles sound simple, but they are exactly what prevents a descent from turning into absolute chaos that one cannot come back from. The Bodhisattva metaphor works here because it captures the attitude required after the labyrinth, not heroic distance and superiority, but close, intimate proximity. The willingness to stand beside someone while pointing quietly to the thread that can actually guide them back to the ground and back to reality. And if there is any hope worth offering, it has to stay this plane and say that the spiral is not glamorous and that suffering is not necessarily a gift, only that there are ways through and that a person does not need to walk the corridor alone. If real support, consequence, and steadiness are brought back into the room. Over time, the conversation naturally shifted from explanation to practice. People would ask the same question in different forms. If the labyrinth is real, how do you stay stable inside of it? The answer always returned to the same foundations. Wake up and move and eat and work and sleep. These simple rhythms appear almost too ordinary to mention, but they carry enormous psychological and spiritual weight. In the Christian tradition, the image of Christ washing the feet of his disciples has always stood out to me. The symbolism is deliberate. Leadership appears through service rather than through spectacle. The teacher kneels, performing an act that looks humble and practical instead of mystical. That gesture mirrors something essential about psychological and spiritual stability. Real guidance does not elevate the teacher above ordinary life. Rather, it anchors both teacher and student inside of it. Teaching grounding practices allows the same principle. It is less about inspiration and more about responsibility. The body must be regulated. Breath must slow when anxiety rises. Sleep must be protected because without it, perception becomes unreliable. Work and commitments must remain intact. So identity stays connected to the real world rather than drifting entirely into symbolic interpretation. Psychology understands these habits as regulation of the nervous system. Ancient traditions understood them as discipline. Different language, same function. When people asked about awakening or transformation, the answer often felt almost disappointing. The real practices look ordinary. They look basic. They don't look mystical. They don't look spiritual. They don't look like the classic Hollywood movie that you might see about altered states, transcendence, and spiritual emergence. The anchors are not glamorous, but they are structures that allow someone to explore the deeper psyche without losing contact with reality. Service in that sense means teaching people how to stay grounded while their inner world changes. It also means reminding them that stepping back into daily routines after fire is not failure. It is the return itself. Home is built there, in mornings, in meals, in bedtime, in labor, in the body learning that the day can be trusted again. At some point, another warning became necessary, not about danger from the outside, but from the mind itself. The labyrinth has a particular trap built into it. When meaning begins multiplying everywhere, the mind starts believing it has discovered something uniquely important. Every coincidence feels like confirmation. Every symbol feels like proof that a deeper intelligence is communicating directly with you. Ancient traditions warned about this repeatedly. In the Sikh tradition, the Khalsa warrior saint carries both humility and strength at the same time. The sword represents courage. The discipline represents restraint. Power without humility becomes dangerous. In psychological terms, this trap has a clear name: inflation. Jung described it as the moment when a person mistakes contact with deeper layers of the psyche for personal greatness. Insight becomes identity. Instead of learning from the experience, the ego begins building a new story about being special. I have seen how quickly this can destabilize someone. The mind becomes completely intoxicated with meaning. Practical responsibilities start disappearing. Sleep collapses. Relationships fracture because no one else seems able to understand the revelations. Everything is just unfolding within that person's mind. This is also where modern confusion becomes costly. Some people will call every intense state awakening. Others will flatten every opening into pathology. Neither is careful enough. There are experiences that carry spiritual force. There are experiences that are plainly dangerous. There are experiences that overlap both domains and need more containment than the person currently has. That is why the warning must be spoken clearly. Insight does not remove the laws of reality. Bills still exist. The body still needs rest. Other people still deserve respect and accountability. The Khalsa symbol works as a mirror for this stage. Courage and discipline must exist together. The person exploring deeper psychological territory needs both. Curiosity pushes the journey forward. Humility keeps the traveler grounded. So the experience becomes wisdom instead of self-destruction. And if the question arises, what happens when modern people have openings without proper training or guidance from elders or intact containers? The answer is not more ego. It is support. It is rest. It is structure. It is honest language. And it is early intervention before the mind builds a throne from its own volatility. Eventually, the role becomes even simpler. Someone arrives in the middle of confusion and asks how to move through it without breaking themselves. In those moments, the goal is not explanation, but simply navigation. The traveler does not need grand philosophy. They need orientation. I often think about Taoist descriptions of the sage during the conversations. The Taoist master is rarely portrayed as prophetic. Instead, the sage appears quiet, almost ordinary, moving through life with an ease that comes from understanding balance. Water becomes that metaphor. It adapts to the shape of the terrain. without losing its nature. Helping someone navigate descent follows that same principle. The first step is slowing everything down, reducing stimulation, reconnecting with reality testing when perception becomes distorted. These actions seem simple, but they are exactly what prevents symbolic experience from overwhelming the nervous system and shutting it down completely. Psychology calls it regulation. Myth calls it balance. When the mind begins producing powerful imagery or interpretations, the temptation is to analyze them endlessly. But often the better move is physical grounding. They actually keep the traveler connected to the entrance while moving through the deeper corridors. The Taoist sage does not eliminate complexity. He maintains balance inside of it. That is the real skill required when helping someone move through descent without losing orientation in the world. And balance also means discernment. Not every altered state is the same. Not every voice of urgency deserves equal trust. Sometimes what is needed is not mythic interpretation, but actually professional help, communal containment, and a room where someone can be held without being either pathologized too quickly or romanticized further into danger and off the cliff edge. If there is any temple of emergence worth building, it begins here, in slowing things down enough that truth can separate itself from speed, from sleep debt, from fear, and from projections. Eventually, the final step became obvious. If these patterns keep appearing in human lives, then someone has to write the map clearly enough to recognize the terrain before they panic. That is what the story is really about. It's not a confession, it is a map. And in mythology, every labyrinth contains a guardian at the threshold. The guardian is not there to stop the traveler forever. The role is to ask a question before entry. Are you prepared to walk this path with responsibility? Guardians exist because certain knowledge can destabilize people who encounter it without the necessary preparations. That image captures exactly how the map should function. In no way should it encourage people to chase intensity. It should always be a reminder of the thread. The map begins with the simplest truths, not far abstract mystical realizations. The simple truths are the gates that protect travelers before they descend too far, before they are completely sucked into the black hole with no return, before they fall off the cliff edge without any structure or without any way to return back to the top of the cliff. Writing the map does not mean claiming authority over the labyrinth. It means acknowledging that the labyrinth exists and that human beings will, for time immemorial, continue encountering it. Whether society recognizes the pattern or not is futile. If the journey appears, the traveler deserves orientation. The myths have repeated this lesson for thousands of years. The descent may be ancient, the danger is forever present and real, and the thread has always existed. And sometimes the most important act a traveler can perform after returning is simply this: draw the map so the next person knows where to place their feet. I also came to see that a map is a kind of blessing when it is done honestly. Not a blessing that flatters the descent, but one that speaks to the next edgewalker without glamour. Walk carefully, protect the basics. Do not worship the fire, and do not enter alone if help is available. If the story can offer anything, let it offer that: a clearer threshold, a steadier handrail, a route back, something that can actually make life worth living after complete and utter chaos and destruction, something that has the ability to alchemize and transform the real reasons why the labyrinth showed up in the first place. That is enough.